So welcome back, everybody. We're real excited to continue on with our spring retreat forward with a special presentation by Tara Rynders. So this is being made possible in partnership with the Actors Theater of Louisville. And just so that you all remember what we shared earlier, Tara is a nurse and she's the artistic director and founder of the clinic. And before we move any further into the program, I just want to ask everyone to please put your questions in the chat box that you may have for Tara and the work that she does. I'm also going to ask that you make sure you keep your mic on mute, and we will be recording this session. So some of you may remember last fall, we had a special night, and we'll flip to that slide just to remind everyone when we had a wonderful mega celebration of alumni stars. And we had a special moment where we recognized and honored the life of our beloved Dr. Juanita Fleming, who is the very first African-American faculty member in our college, a member of the American Academy of Nursing as a fellow and also as a living legend. And so I always like to share for those that aren't familiar with that, that is very impressive. It is the Mecca, very prestigious. So I can just tell you that Juanita is smiling down right now because it is her son who is the CEO of the Actors Theater of Louisville who made this possible. And I just think it's just wonderful that Robert was able to introduce us to Tara for this special session that we're going to have, because he really does recognize the important work that nurses do, that his mother did, the important healing that we do. And this is going to be our opportunity to see how nursing and the performing arts can come together. So with this, I'm honored and thrilled to introduce everyone to Tara Rynders, all the way from Colorado.
Thank you, Janie. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Tara Rynders. I'm really excited to be here with you all, to be part of the UK community and spend this time together. I'd like to share a little bit about the work that I've been doing. And before I get started, I'd just like to say that this work was done over the past 5 years, and I would like to acknowledge my role in upholding racism and my biases and the work that I have done. You'll see photos and video, and it reflects the white experience. And so you'll see most recently our Resiliency Moments does have, we hired some really incredible and experts in the arts, 2 Black women who I'll be showing later, but I just would like to first recognize that. So thank you all so much. You can do next slide, Emily. So the clinic is, I'm the artistic director of the clinic. It's an arts-based immersive theater company that is based in Colorado, but we do virtual experiences around the world. And we created an immersive theater performance in Rose Medical Center, as well as workshops that are arts and play-based and resiliency moments. So I'll be speaking more to some of this in just a moment and showing you some video. These are our co-directors. This is Leah Bonfiglio, Claire Hamor, and Jad Tank. Leah is an artist based in New York City. Claire is based out of Denver, and Jad is from Lebanon and based in Lebanon and Houston. And together we are the creators and co-directors of the clinic. My background, I like to spend a little bit of time here. My background is in nursing. I've been a nurse for over 15 years. I've worked primarily in the emergency room, but I've also done medical surgery as well as the infusion center. And I started as a CNA, and I worked as a CNA for 5 years before that on the telemetry unit. And I have been a dancer my whole life. Ever since I was a little girl, I was in classes and performed, and have always kept resiliency or dancing as part of my resiliency, as part of what makes me whole and grounded. And you can see those are my twins. They are about maybe a year here. They're currently 5 years old now, and you may get a guest appearance of them at some point during this presentation, just to warn you. But they are now 5 and doing remote learning, but in kindergarten. So I'd like to share just briefly some of the background that brought me to this place. I've experienced a lot of loss, like many of us in our lives, but and this loss has led me to this place of bringing the arts, my resiliency, alongside nursing. My mother at 49 was diagnosed with cancer and passed away. And I was 26 at the time and the oldest of 4 children. And with no father in the picture, I became the mother very quickly in our family. And shortly after she passed and my youngest sister was 16, went to college, that I decided to go back to school, to graduate school, and get my degree in dance. And that was really important for me. It was a time that I needed to really grab onto what cared for me in that moment, and that was dancing. So I went back to school and studied dance for 3 years and received my master's. During that process, like, I think a year before I was finished, my sister became extremely ill with a disease called acute disseminating encephalomyelitis, and she is now a quadriplegic and cannot speak. However, she's mentally there, 100% in her brain, but she's locked in her body. So she went from a 26-year-old mother with an 8-year-old daughter and to someone who could not move in her body. And so I take this time to describe this experience because it really is what created these one-on-one artistic moments for healthcare providers that I'll get into later on. But I lived with my sister in the rehabilitation room, and I spent time with her, bathing her, being her voice when she couldn't speak. And I developed this understanding of holding the joy alongside these intimate moments of what it's like to care for another person in that time. And so it became a very important framework for how I realized that as we care in our joy, as we care in our grief, we also are caring in our joy, and how those two worlds are held together. And I took a year off of graduate school to be with her, and I was able to come back and create something based on that experience. The other was my brother at age 30. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia shortly after my mother passed away. And he wandered a lot. He was a wanderer. So he was in and out of jail for trespassing many times in his life. And unfortunately, when last time he went into jail, he ended up going to the hospital for complications with a wound that he had. And he refused care when he was in the hospital. And of course, things are very complicated, but he refused care and ended up dying without family being told what was going on. And so my brother died in the hospital with no family at age of 30. And that to me really brings me to this idea of our bias around maybe someone who's coming in from the jail system, and how are we not supporting those patients as well. So I'll just leave it there, but the main things to take away is that with my mother, with her death, I was able to return to my dancing as a means of caring. And for my sister, I had these incredible one-on-one, intimate, vulnerable experiences with her that led to creating these moments with other people. And as I said, with my brother. And then lastly, I had an ectopic pregnancy when my twins were 6 months old, and I almost died. And I realized in that moment, the care that my nurse gave to me when they called a code yellow, and my room was full with people, and I was in Trendelenburg, and I was passed out, but I could hear everything. And the moment my nurse grabbed my hand and she said, "I'm here and you're going to be okay," I remember thinking, thank you for remembering me. Thank you for remembering that I'm a person in here who's really, really scared, and I'm scared that I might die. So thank you. And I remember thanking her in my mind during that moment. And that made me realize how important we are as nurses and healthcare providers. We have this opportunity to jump alongside somebody in some of their most intimate and vulnerable and horrendous times of their life to make a huge difference. So that's my background leading me up to this place. So the clinic, why this and why now? It's really important that we recognize the burnout and what we're dealing with. And I think this slide was more applicable pre-COVID because I think we all have a pretty good grasp now of why this work is important. So the clinic has multiple offerings. We have First Do No Harm, an immersive theater performance, our workshop series, COVID stories, resiliency moments, creative caregivers, a nurse's calling, and knowledge sharing. And I'll go into some of those next here. So I'd like to just stop right here for a moment and just take any questions. I don't see any in the chat box, but I'll just take a brief moment if anyone has any questions on the background of the clinic. All right, let's go ahead and move on.
Wait, Tara, sorry. I couldn't find my my unmute button, but I have a question.
Yes.
So how did you get from all of that to starting this clinic, or are you going to get into that story as you go through this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I am going to get into it a little bit, but I'll just say that I knew that I had to share this information that I received as a patient, that it felt very pertinent to my role as a, one second. Yes, darling.
Someone turn the movie off and we need you to help us.
Okay, you're going to have to figure it out. I'll be there in a moment.
I
Okay,
can't.
okay, I'll be right there.
Number.
Okay, thank you. So when I had that experience as a patient, it felt really important to share my experience of being flipped as a patient instead of a healthcare provider as the first time. That was such important knowledge. And so that we don't get unless we're in unless we're in the shoes of our patients, literally. And so I began by meeting with my CNO and asking, can I have some time with our nursing leaders? I just like to share my story with them. And I wanted to do it through the arts. So I had a 1-hour meeting with all the nursing leaders. There was 100 of them. And I led them through an arts-based experiences that helped them to realize what it could feel like to be a patient. So we did a slow 5-minute walking, as slow as you possibly can for 5 minutes. And I said, that's 5 minutes. Because I remember the moment I asked for pain medicine and how long it actually took to get the pain medicine when I was in excruciating pain. And 5 minutes can feel like forever to a patient, but to us, 5 minutes goes by in a second. And so that was one example of ways that I helped offer empathy for what it felt like to be in the shoes of our patients. And then from there, things just started to be created. I wanted to raise awareness of burnout and fatigue because I didn't like asking more from our nurses. I wanted to be able to show, we need more support. We need more care in order to give the care that our patients deserve. And that's where we created the immersive theater performance, which I'll get into next.
Thank you. We do have one more question. And it's from Dr. Hahn. So is the focus tertiary care, or is there anything you do with public health or prevention?
Yeah, the focus is not tertiary care. It is open for healthcare providers. And specifically, we've been working with nurses because that's my background, but we've also worked with social workers in hospice settings. And so it's really the focus is on caring for healthcare providers in whatever means that is and whatever population that they work with, because it means we're caring for the caregivers in order for them to care for whether it's in public health, primary care, inpatient, whatever that may be. Thank you, Ellen, for that.
I don't see any more right now.
Okay, great. So we'll move on now to our video of the workshops that we did. This is just to give you an idea of what we created and the spirit around that.
I remember not really being able to have the compassion for somebody in their situation that I used to have, that I felt desensitized to their pain and their suffering. And after that, I realized I was tired and I was experiencing compassion fatigue. My name is Tara Rynders. I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for over 15 years. And I'm a dancer, and I am the artistic director of the clinic, which includes resiliency workshops for nurses and an immersive theater performance that takes place in the hospital setting to raise awareness of compassion fatigue and nursing burnout. The clinic is a 6-week workshop series for nurses to combat compassion fatigue and burnout through resiliency training with the arts, music, dance, and performance. It's based in play, so it brings us out of our heads and into our bodies. And just like children, we get curious again and we start thinking about things differently. We start questioning things. We use theater and acting and role-playing as a way to address certain really deep and tough questions and issues at hand, but do it through a playful lens.
I was surprised at what came out of that and what actually was causing grief that I was holding on to. And it was so great in all the different ways that we visited with the movement and sharing our stories with other nurses who I think when they heard them can really relate and connect.
I think just stress lives more in your body than you ever realize. And I think something that happened 50 years ago can be completely in your body, and you know about it. You hear about veterans from war, but you don't really know how it affects a person until you let it out.
Some of the worst days feel like they are connected intrinsically to who you are in this profession. That my value as a nurse is how I can take care of people. So on my worst days, does that mean I'm not doing a good job at taking care of people? And it's being able to kind of disconnect those two ideas.
So what motivated me for this workshop series is I had an experience as a patient where I almost died, and I realized how important nurses are, that they are everything to a patient. And I began researching patient outcomes, patient experiences. I wanted every patient to feel seen and heard and cared for every time. So I realized that compassion fatigue and nursing burnout was stealing the joy that we nurses can receive from caring for another human being, and that there's a huge need for our nurses to be supported and cared for and seen as nurses. The hospital benefits from every employee caring for themselves, because when a nurse is caring for him or herself, they're caring for their patients, and they are experiencing satisfaction as a nurse. They're empowered to care for others in a healthy way, which decreases turnover, increases patient satisfaction, nursing satisfaction. Ultimately, everyone wins.
This is a program for nurses by nurses, and I think that's one of the most important aspects of it is you're being understood, heard, and seen by someone else who has been through what you've been through, and maybe different stories, but the underlying theme is the same.
Working with performers has been a totally new experience for me, very outside of the box, and it's been a fun, new approach to looking at a serious issue.
Identifying that story and finding the ways to move to help you identify how that story really impacted you, emotionally and physically. Didn't even think that story affected me until she said that prompt, and I was like, oh, I remember that. Yeah, after that I was pretty pissed. And then I was like, wait a minute, I was more than that,
Being able to move, my body helps me move through certain pieces of my story that weren't necessarily as comfortable. And seeing other people struggle with the same things I struggled with, it built a little bit of a camaraderie around, everybody who was in the group, that nobody's going through it alone.
A really important component of this workshop series is the IRB-approved nurse-led research study that we're doing, and we will continue to do with every workshop series, so that we're gathering data to create evidence-based practices that can be used for nurses, but also brought to the bedside and used for the care of our patients.
All right, thank you, Emily, for playing that. I think that does a good idea of offering you all an understanding of the spirit behind the work that we do of the clinic, of it being based in play, in the arts, in vulnerability, and this idea of holding self-care, but moving through self-care into collective care. And so that what we do as nurses, as healthcare providers, as healers, that we're bringing this care not only to ourselves, but to one another, that we're hearing each other's stories and we're saying, yeah, me too, I get that. And a lot of the feedback was nurses saying, I go home and I tell this to my partner, I even tell this to my therapist, but they don't understand the depth of the grief and the pain and the trauma that I hold in my body the way that another nurse or healthcare provider understands, because they have been in it with me together. So one of the participants in the workshop gave me this quote, and I thought it was very applicable to my story as well as I think all of us, is that nobody escapes being wounded. We are all wounded people, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. The main question is not how can we hide our wounds so we don't have to, how can we hide our wounds so we don't have to be embarrassed, but how can we put our woundedness in the service of others? When our wounds cease to be a source of shame and become a source of healing, we have become wounded healers. Henry Nouwen. And I think this is really important because what we do at the clinic is we offer space for people to be honest and to tell the truth about where they're at emotionally, where they're at in many areas, and to come alongside that and use that as a space for healing. So First Do No Harm is a performance created with my co-directors, is an immersive theater performance. And that, I don't know how many of you are familiar with immersive theater, but for me, my definition of immersive theater is that it's interactive, that the participants are involved in some way, that during the performance, there's really not that wall, there's not a stage and chairs watching, but we're bringing you along in the journey, that you are experiencing this from all different spaces, and that you're caught up in the play, in the movement, and in the emotional understanding of the characters. You're right alongside them. So First Do No Harm was set in 2018. So remember, this was like pre-COVID, a lot of stigma still around mental health issues, especially for nurses. A lot of nurses, healthcare providers not wanting to admit that they needed help, that there was even an issue here. So I'm going to just show this quick promo, and I'll show another video of a more in-depth view of this work as well. But this happened inside the hospital, and it was open to the general public, and we charged for tickets, and we sold out every night for 8 nights, and then added 2 more shows and sold those out. So there was this hunger, this desire to see kind of the inside perspective. And the beautiful thing about this performance, it was told from the perspective of nurses and from the perspective of the patient's family members, which are really perspectives we don't hear very often. So that was just a quick clip of kind of a bunch of different scenes put together. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll just break it down a little bit for you. So first, Do No Harm started inside the main entrance of the hospital, and they actually shut the main entrance down for 15 minutes and just escorted anyone who was coming and going just around the corner for us to be able to use this entrance, which was pretty amazing that they allowed us to do this. Especially, I think of this now, trying to do something like this during COVID. And it's kind of mind-boggling that we were able to do this beforehand. So we performed inside of these glass doors to give this appearance like that we were actually operating inside of this surgery center. And you can go to the next slide, Emily. And you can see the audience is on the other side of the doors, and we do this performance, and I'll show a video of this, so we could go to the next slide. And the next slide. You can see we have live music. We also have in the back corner there our anesthesiologist, who was our DJ, also doing some live mixes as well. The violin. And then if you'll go back to two more, Emily, sorry. You'll see here that this was the connecting hallway from our hospital to the office buildings, the physician office buildings. And we use this hallway as a means to show different perspectives with the movement, which you'll also see. This next slide is inside a hallway where lab was, but we utilized this vending machine for this monologue where the nurse expressed her feelings of inadequacy and fatigue and burnout, and life as being not only a nurse and a caregiver, but also raising children at the same time. And this was a really interesting room we found when we were researching the hospital for spaces to perform. And I had never seen it before. It was this huge room full of beds. It looked like a graveyard of beds. And so we put in a red light, we covered all the beds with sheets. And there was this really beautiful moment where the wife to the patient is having a breakdown. And you get some more background on her relationship with her partner, but you also see the sadness and the grief that she's going through as she's slowly realizing that she's losing her partner. This is Death, played by Leah Bonfiglio, and she's one of the co-directors and performs with Third Rail Projects in New York City, and she did a really beautiful job holding the space as Death. And so Death would come in and out of the story and pop a balloon, and that means that a person was taken away and died. This was an interesting scene, and not everybody saw this scene. So during the performance, they split up into groups and everyone went to these different areas. Some experienced all similar scenes, but some got to see scenes that others didn't. And this was one of those scenes where Death explains to the patient the pathophysiology behind a widowmaker, behind this heart attack that this patient was having. So it was really this intimate conversation with death and facing your own death and facing the exact reason why you're dying, and involving the guests, the audience members in this conversation as well. And then you'll see in this next slide, this reckoning that the patient is having with his own death. And then the next slide, you'll see actually the audience members walking the patient to his deathbed, literally. And this is this one last interaction with the wife saying, "You cannot die." I'm getting choked up right now, but "You cannot die on me. You have to stay living." And just a really heartfelt moment when that she gets to say goodbye in her own way by telling him not to die. It was her last goodbye. And then ultimately you see this, she just did such a great job playing this role that is bringing back these emotions for me of feeling sad. You see I'm doing CPR, and there's live music, and it was really dramatic and pulled on the heartstrings, but you watch her as healthcare providers and myself working in the ER, I've seen this face so many times, this loved one losing someone, but this experience was really powerful and hard for a lot of people who have never seen this before. And then we bring everyone back to the chapel, and we have this reckoning of what just happened. And we do that through dance and movement and joy. And we make the case that the amount that we grieve, the amount that we lose, is the amount that we're able to feel joy. And so we hold again, like I did with my sister, these two worlds of caring and suffering and tragedy alongside the beauty and the joy that still exists. Not one doesn't mean it takes away from this, but we just hold those two worlds with each other and we get curious about it. And so I'd like to just show this one last opening scene, which is more of like an insider's view of the opening scene inside the entrance of the main hallway. So that's just a little bit of a closer behind the scenes view of the actual action. We received a lot of recognition in media for this performance alongside our workshops from Newsweek, and were highlighted on PBS NewsHour, which was really, really great. And received in 2019, I received the Nightingale Luminary Award for this work as well. But what really brought me the most joy and grounding in that this work is so important was not the recognition publicly, but the words that were spoken after from the nurses and the doctors. And I think that's on the next slide, Emily, speaking to the slew of emotions. They felt so amazed or felt so moved and cried and laughed and guided to release a lot energetically. And then a physician, it captured, spoke to the decades I have spent witnessing others' grief and captured the fatigue that we are all vulnerable to feeling. First Do No Harm has brought a new reality to our hospital through the beautiful art of dance. By far the most artistic, emotionally, and powerful performance I have ever seen. I laughed, I cried, I gasped, and nodded a lot. These emotions continue today as I try to explain to others. And I think this was what the goal was to take away the stigma, to honor the work that we do by telling the truth. And I'll keep going back to that because I think in our profession, we hide a lot. And I think emotionally, we need to start telling the truth about how we feel and about what we are going through. And it's only then that others are able to tell their truth as well. So I'd like to just stop there for a moment and see if there's any questions that I can address at this time.
There are a lot of kudos in the comment section. Outstanding, mesmerizing, made me teary, bringing up a lot of stuff. Dr. Moreland, who is the chief nurse at UK Healthcare, asked about the 6-week workshops. Is it a weekly guided workshop? Does it work best with a team? Or have you had nurses from multiple areas at one workshop?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Gwen. The workshops is a guided weekly 2 hours each week for 6 weeks. And what we did, and given COVID, we're having to operate differently, but we opened it up to all direct patient care nurses in 2 hospitals. So the Medical Center of Aurora, as well as Rose Medical Center, 2 hospitals in the Denver area. And we brought in the nurses, and then we also had like 8 to 10 artists join us as well. So it was really nurse and artist, this experience of bringing these 2 worlds together during the workshop series. So they came from all multiple areas, from the ER, from the ICU, from the med surg, which, as many of you will know, doesn't make, it adds a lot of variables for the research, but made for wonderful conversation and best practice sharing within our time together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I was just thinking of some of our teams that have been most impacted by COVID. Everybody's been, of course, impacted, but those teams have been most impacted, and wondering if that, smaller team working together, if that would be beneficial because of what they've shared together.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And because that's something, even though these nurses had never necessarily worked together, they developed this really deep relationship, community, camaraderie with one another through the sharing. I'll get into more detail of their grief stories, and they actually didn't want to stop meeting. So we've been meeting for over a year now, every month, continuing this work together as well. So it is, I could see how impactful it would be for a team in that group cohesion as well, and community building, absolutely. Great question, thank you. And I think that was it. Is that true, Julianne?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to break down briefly the theories and of the trainings of the workshops. And then I'll get into the resiliency moments that we created in the midst of COVID. So we're using Jean Watson's theory of human caring as really as our basis for the work that we do. But we're really also grounded in the See Me as a Person framework. And I'll go over that, and relationship-based care. We use play theory, disruptive innovation theory, trauma-informed care, and the tenets of animating democracy to help us evaluate the work that we're doing in order to navigate this idea of art for social change. So the See Me as a Person framework, this is a quote from that: authentic connection can be learned, practiced, reflected upon, continuously developed and mastered. It is through presence and attunement that you convey the essential messages in nursing. I see you. I am interested in you. I give you my full attention. I am here and you are safe. Presence is not what you do, but it's the way that you are. It is a state of being. You cannot connect to another without being present and attuned. So the framework is attuning, intentionally connecting with people exactly where they are, and remembering that what might be routine for you is often life-altering for the person receiving care. Wondering, curiosity, questioning, a practice of discovery, grounded in curiosity and genuine, authentic interest in the other. Tell me more about that. Learning about the person is fundamental to the provision of safe quality care, alongside learning about the family, asking the family members questions. The practice of listening to, oops, do you mind going back? Thank you, Emily. The practice of listening to, respecting, and acting on what we actually learn, and going from that place to holding, creating a safe haven. So this framework is how we created the curriculum for our workshops. We started with attuning, wondering, following, holding, then went into our grief stories. And you saw in the video where each nurse was talking and sharing. We wrote grief stories, and there'll be an example through the COVID stories that we do, where we wrote out our stories. I remember when, and we wrote out our story about a patient experience we had, something that affected us deeply. And then the story went to say, after that, and then we wrote about how it made us feel. And then we circled words. And this was an exercise I did with my professor, Onye Ozuzu, in the University of Colorado at Boulder, who's now the director of dance at the University of Florida. And we created movements to different parts of our story, to different words, gestures that represented those words. And then we created a dance with them. And so they went in the middle of the circle and shared their story through movement and speaking as well. A play framework, Miguel Sicar is a theorist in play. And so play is an activity, while playfulness is an attitude. So it's an attitude we brought to the whole workshop series. An activity is a coherent and finite set of actions performed for certain purposes, while attitude is a stance toward an activity, a psychological, physical, and emotional perspective we take on. So the nurses immediately came into this experience of play. They did not know what to do. We really disrupted their normal way of thinking. And then we also use trauma-informed care. So in this next section, I'll talk about resiliency moments. We're using these theories along with trauma-informed care to actually train the artists. So the artists are all trained in these nursing theories. The artists are trained in trauma-informed care so that the spaces that we're creating are actually holding and caring instead of perpetuating trauma. And quickly, just disruptive innovation theory is actually a business model of going and disrupting. And so one of the main tenets of this work is disruption. Like, how can we come in and totally disrupt the way somebody thinks? Because it's really then that you're able to see things differently and experience things differently. As nurses and healthcare providers, we are in control 100% of the time, because if we're not, someone may die. So that we have to hold that space for them all the time. What this did was put the nurses in this place of like, I have no idea what's going on right now, and I'm not sure what to do. And we came alongside them in that moment and supported them through play and doing fun activities and role playing and giving them the tools as they needed them. But it helped them to start thinking differently and think creatively. We use the aesthetic perspectives of disruption, commitment, communal meaning, cultural integrity, stickiness, resourcefulness as a means to evaluate the work that we're doing. And this was created for that very reason. So a lot of granting agencies who give money to arts for social change will use this as their framework to evaluate work, to make sure that the art that's being creative is rigorous, as well as the programs are rigorous and following these perspectives. This week, like I said, we did an IRB research study, and these were our results. We used the ProQual Professional Quality of Life Survey pre and post. So right before week 1, and then post at the end of our last session together. And we had a very small sample size, so these results are not statistically significant. I believe that's one of the reasons, but either way, we did see a decrease in burnout and secondary traumatic stress, and with this suggesting an increase in empathy as well. We also shared our grief stories. So in the workshops, the nurses, as I said, spent time developing these grief stories. Then we spent time bringing our grief stories together for the nurses to share as one performance. And we brought that to the executive team. We performed for the nursing leaders, the executive team, and for the clinical clinical nurse coordinators of the hospitals. And it was like over 100 people plus that we performed this for, and it was really powerful. And this was some of the feedback, I'll let you read through that, really helped, the feedback that we received after they watched that performance. And really what they're saying is, me too. Thank you. Yeah, you're portraying what I'm going through. And that really is the antidote to shame for feeling these feelings or not knowing what to do, is empathy. So I'll just stop there if there's any questions. So I just see I appreciate your emphasis on how we must move beyond self-care to caring for each other in addition to our patients. It is time for organizations to invest in resources for nursing staff. Yep, thank you, Melanie, 100%. And I agree wholeheartedly. There is a great need from Lee Welmsley. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. There's a great need to understand the impact of trauma on both ourselves and patients. Secondary or vicarious trauma is something that most, if not all, nurses experience without even knowing it. We would all be better served by understanding more about how we are affected by taking care of others. Yeah, thank you, Leanne. I agree. And I think this is really, this work is raising awareness of that and creating a safe place for people to talk about it. And then bringing in the experts as well alongside the arts to care. Morgan, I really resonate with taking away the stigma of allowing our care to affect us. What if as a healthcare community, we set the expectation that this work will affect you physically, emotionally, and mentally, and we offer programs to help mitigate that as part of your paid time because this is a direct effect of what you do. I love that. I think that would, that would be incredible for that to be part of the job description of going in. And I think that also starts in nursing schools. That's what we're setting people up to understand. This work will, I love how you said that, Morgan, this work will affect you. Boom. Yep. And Kent Brower, you mentioned having a DJ in your videos. How has or will music play a role in this going forward? I think music as itself can be a wonderful tool, but added with dance, this can be very powerful. Yeah, I agree. The music for the performance was really everything. And to see it in the hospital setting, which you don't see normally, to hear a violin in the hospital was just so powerful. And I will be speaking more about how music plays a role in coming up here. Did you have any resistance from nurses and how did you deal with that? Yeah, I think there was some resistance, especially in the workshops at first, not knowing what was going on. And I think we could have done a better job offering more preparation for them, and moving forward, we are what to expect. But the resistance, how we dealt with it was with support. So immediately if there was resistance, one of the artists would come alongside and say, hey, let's try this together. Or do you need a minute? What's going on? What do you need right now? And really, and it was less maybe support or less resistance and maybe a little bit more confusion of like, what is happening right now? What world am I in? What did I just walk into? And so it was maybe a little bit more curiosity and wonderment than resistance. But I haven't had really met with really hard resistance based on the preparation that we do to create the space that allows people to come into it. It's a lot of preparation up front. And then Kristen Ashford would love to see this work also offered at our UK healthcare substance use clinics and our community organizations, Voices of Hope. Yeah, I would love to talk more with you about that. I think this work is really important, especially in those high burnout areas as well. All right, thank you all so much for your questions. Okay, COVID stories. So in the midst of the pandemic, we created, how are we doing on time? We created COVID stories, and I'm gonna skip this video, Emily, so we can move on. This video is on my website, so if you're curious, then I encourage you to go. But this really was an extension of our grief stories. And like I said, the nurses wanted to meet monthly, and And so we continued to meet monthly. Even during COVID, we started online meeting virtually. And then at one point we met in the park and social distance, and we wrote out our COVID stories, starting with the same prompt. I remember when after that and really looked at the actual experiences of being a nurse in the midst of COVID, created movement. We learned each other's movement. So that was another part of this, is really taking on each other's stories and collectively experiencing them and collectively caring for each other, moving through the self and into the we of this. So I'd like to jump into resiliency moments, because this is something that can actually be happening now. And it's a virtual experience. And what it does is it brings nurses and healthcare providers together with artists from all over the world. And that was a really beautiful thing, to be able to bring in voices virtually that you aren't able to do in an in-person setting. So Resiliency Moments, as it stands right now, is a 1 hour, I'm in the middle of developing a protocol for this multi-site study. So I'm going to call it an intervention as well, but an experience, a 1 hour experience for healthcare providers to join with a group of artists at the same time. And Emily, I also have most of the videos for these are at the clinicperformance.com, just FYI, so you have that URL out there as well. So this is Leah Bonfiglio, one of our artists. Her Resiliency Moment is a mini immersive theater experience that brings together storytelling and gardening. The guest witnesses the planting and watering of a lily bulb while listening to a reading from The Secret Garden. She or he is asked to dedicate the lily's growth to someone or something. The artist makes a promise of cultivating and tending the lily and sending photos of its progress to the guests. So let me back up just a moment. Everyone signs on like we all are now. And let's say there's 10 of us here. So there would also be 10 artists on the call. There's a hostess who welcomes everyone. It's a little bit theatrical and fun and grounded in play. And she lets them know what to expect. We do some technology issues. Can I see you? Can I hear you? And then we have a moment. We take a breath together, which I forgot to do with all of us at the beginning, but I'll do one at the end. And then we get taken into breakout rooms. So when you go to a breakout room, it'll be just you and the artist, one-to-one, nobody else. And the artist has created this world for you. So you come into this world, like you can see Leah holding up her curtains. It's like you're peeking in, and she opens up her curtains and then shows you, then you just see her hands digging in the dirt. And she talks to you about gardening, and then she reads you a story, and she asks you, what's something you would like to let go of in order for something to grow? So it really is just this moment of you feeling seen and heard as a healthcare provider and tended to through an artistic medium. This is Kelly Greenlight. She was is based in Nigeria and was able to virtually come in for these as well. And her moment was incredible. She began with this singing. So she asks you to close your eyes, and she just sings. And it takes you to this incredible place to just hear her singing this one song just for you. And then it's a moment for you to sit and receive. And it evolves into thinking about nature. And she talks about how nature was very healing for her and her grief, and asks you some questions about places you like to go, nature you like to experience, and the healing power that nature holds for us during some of our most difficult moments. And the participant is left swimming in their natural habitat, whatever that may be, and that brings them peace as their moment ends with her again just singing, and she has the most incredible voice. This is Jad Tink, and he was virtually coming in from Lebanon, and he leads through gestures. So asks you, similar to our grief stories, but asks you about someone or something. It may be a pet or a loved one that you have lost, and asks you questions about it. And then you create movement, and then you create this dance together, and you end up, and you use this dance in repetition over and over again. And he does it with you, and you're honoring this person through movement. And then you have this dance. So whenever you miss that person, you're able, or that thing, you're able to do that dance for them. And comfort not only yourself, but have comfort knowing that another person in Lebanon knows this dance as well. This is Sun Chung. She's an artist out of New York City, and she created this really beautiful green, you come in and it's all green light, and she has this singing bowl that she plays. It's again, this the use of music here, singing and the singing bowl to transport you to a different space where the air is just filled with this music, and there's moments of memory, moments of stillness, and moments of breath, and you're gently guided to find a new grounding, a new lightness in your body. Abby Ahmad, based in New York City, the musician and the nurse co-create a song together based on prompts. So she has, you can kind of see, but has like hundreds of guitars and different instruments behind her. And you get to, she shows you different strums, shows you different instruments, and you get to choose what you want. And then she asks you questions. And based on your questions, she creates a song for you in the moment, records it, and sends it to you. Let's see. We'll have to skip this one as well. These are just some nurses' testimonials, but I want to be cognizant of our time together. Any questions? No, okay, we'll go ahead and move on. So next steps, let's go to the next slide. So I'm currently partnering with HCA Hospital Corporations of America to offer a multi-site research study to over 30 different hospitals, bringing this, the resiliency moments specifically to them with, as like I said, we're currently writing the protocol for that. And then I'm been asked to do some keynote speaking around this work as well for the EduCare Symposium, and was just asked by the Oncology Nursing Foundation to be their guest lecturer for the, it's a guest lectureship for the year 2021. So that was really honoring, and I'm excited for that. And then I'm looking into, I've applied to get my PhD as well. So that's kind of where we're at with some of this, and bringing the workshops and the performance when it's possible to hospitals after COVID. And we are creating a virtual workshop series right now that we're able to do, we'll be able to do virtually. And then I'm also doing a one-woman performance in Denver called A Nurse's Calling that really is focusing on our grief, focusing on the burnout as a baseline pre-COVID. And then where does that leave us now? If we were already burnt out, where are we now? Asking those questions. And then also asking the question, what is the role that I play as a nurse in upholding racism at the bedside? What is the role that I play in health inequities and health disparities? And what is the role that I play as a nurse, but what is the role that we play as a community of healthcare providers? And then again, it goes back to telling the truth and confessing. And for me, that as part of my anti-racism work will be also a huge part of this performance. And we'll skip this video too. And then I don't know if Robert or Emily, if you would like to talk a little bit at this point of the partnership that we're developing.
Sure, I just thank you, everybody. It's such an honor to be here with you, Tara, and with all of you nurses at UK. I'm Robert Barry Fleming, the Executive Artistic Director. It is through our extraordinary artistic producer, Emily Tarquin, that I had the good fortune to know of Tara's work. I am so honored the kind of care and honoring you gave to my mother. And obviously, I'm highly motivated to see a partnership and an opportunity to participate in these resiliency moments and create a healing space for our heroic frontline workers in the helping profession of nursing. Nothing seemed, as a choreographer, artist, and son of a nurse, more fitting to be able to make this opportunity the beginning of flowering, some way of flowering to be of service to a community that has given so much and has been so heroic in a very challenging year. So I'm most grateful for this opportunity, most grateful for Tara sharing her brilliance and her care, and very excited about the R&D aspect, and most importantly, the healing possibilities. Emily, would you like to take a a moment to share.
Yeah, I'll just add, of course, just my love and gratitude to all of the people in this room for the work that you do. You know, we experienced a different side of the pandemic in our industry when we shut down our public performance, and it has also unlocked something new for us. And, you know, see Tara's work as an integral part of that, the beautiful intersection of art and service. What we want this to be part of our storytelling revolution and our work of service to you all, and just excited to get to share this with you. Tara, I'll go back to you.
If it's okay, at this point, I would like to close by saying thank you to Tara for sharing your journey and the work you're doing. It really is breathtaking. Now we're recording this and we will share all of the notes, but everyone was mesmerized. I saw tears in the eyes. You read the comments. Your work is breathtaking. It's uplifting. It's inspiring. And we thank you, Tara. We do. We really thank you for all that you're doing. Robert, oh my God, your mother is just so beaming. You have that soul of a nurse. And I thank you so much, you and Emily both, for bringing Tara to us. I mean,
Thank you, Jenny.
you know, you just sent me her web link and said, check this out. I know that you're worried about mental health and wellness of nurses and the work we're doing here at the University of Kentucky. By the way, there's only one place to get your PhD, Tara, and that's with us. Okay.
Thank you, Jamie.
But Robert, you knew the work we were doing with resiliency and trying to build that culture of practices for our students, our faculty and staff, and all of our community at large. And you just said, check this out and see what you think. You and Emily made it happen. And I cannot thank you enough for helping us see how we can bring the work that we do as nurses together with the performing arts. It is such a gift. Today has been such a gift.
Thank you so
to
much,
be able
Jenny.
to sit and receive such a beautiful presentation. So on behalf of everyone, our college at large, our community partners, we had a lot of colleagues that joined us, state leaders in Kentucky, leaders with our Kentucky deans and directors. We had leadership at UK Healthcare Nursing, Medicine, as well as interprofessional education and our area health education center. Breathtaking, and we cannot thank you enough. And I will just turn it back over to Julie on behalf of the faculty and staff of the College of Nursing. If you have some closing comments, we've all got your contact, and nothing but greatness is going to continue to come out of this. I just know it. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for your enthusiasm.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone.
Well,
Julie, you want to close this up?
Yes, on behalf of the faculty, I want to thank all of you for bringing this to us today. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing and where this came from, Tara, and what all the work you've put into it. It's amazing. For faculty, we would really like to hear your comments about this. So please feel free to email me or someone from Faculty Council. And I see your chat messages and in the box. And but if there's something else you would like to convey, feel free, and we will pass comments along as appropriate. Thank you, Janie, for bringing this to us also. And we'll be doing something with this. I don't know what, but we'll be doing something.
We will.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today and staying and your attention, and have a great week. And here's to a different, lovely spring semester.
Tara, thank you again. It's an honor and a real privilege. Thank you so much. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, College of Nursing, and all of our community at large for joining us.